The assignment DR. Marcus Webb adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses as he walked through the sterile corridors of the Harmony Station research facility. The morning briefing had been clear. Another refugee ship had arrived from the Kepler sector, carrying survivors from the devastating stellar collapse that had wiped out 3 entire star systems. Among the displaced were representatives of species humanity had never encountered before. "You'll be working with one of the Zephyrians," Director Fontaine had explained, sliding a thin file across the polished conference table. "They're empathic. Beings highly intelligent, but their communication methods are ... unconventional. We need them integrated into our protocols as soon as possible." Marcus had spent 15 years as a xenolinguist, helping dozens of alien species master human languages for diplomatic and practical purposes. He took pride in his methodical approach: phonetic breakdowns, grammatical structures, cultural context. Every species had their challenges, but patience and persistence always won in the end. Now, standing outside Laboratory 7, he reviewed the sparse notes in the file. The Zephyrian female designated as Githara had been selected as the most promising candidate for language acquisition among her people. Her psychological profile indicated high intelligence and emotional stability, crucial traits for successful cross-species communication. Marcus pressed his palm against the biometric scanner and stepped inside. The laboratory had been modified. For their guests' softer lighting, temperature controls adjusted for Zephyrian physiology, and specialized seating that accommodated their unique anatomy. In the center of the room sat a being unlike anything he'd encountered before. Githara was humanoid in basic structure, but possessed an ethereal quality that seemed to bend light around her translucent skin. Her movements were fluid, almost dance-like, and her large, iridescent eyes tracked his approach with an intensity that made him momentarily uncomfortable. What struck him most was the subtle shimmer that seemed to emanate from her form, like heat waves rising from summer pavement. "Good morning," Marcus said, setting his materials on the desk. "I'm Dr. Webb. I'll be helping you learn English." Githara tilted her head, and Marcus noticed her breathing had synchronized with his own. She made no attempt to speak, but her gaze never left his face. There was something unsettling about her attention, not hostile, but deeply penetrating, as if she were reading something written just beneath his skin. "We'll start with basic vocabulary," Marcus continued, activating his tablet and pulling up the standard first contact language protocol. Simple nouns, verbs, everyday objects. He pointed to himself. Marcus. Then to her. Githara. He repeated the exercise several times, speaking slowly and clearly. Githara's lips moved slightly, but no sound emerged. Instead, that strange shimmer around her intensified, and Marcus felt an odd tingling sensation, like the moment before lightning strikes. Something was definitely happening, but it wasn't language as he understood it. The struggle 3 weeks. Into their sessions, Marcus was beginning to question his methods. Githara attended every lesson with unwavering attention, her luminous eyes never leaving his face, but her progress with spoken English remained virtually non-existent. She could produce sound-soft, melodic tones that seemed to resonate from somewhere deep within her chest, but they bore no resemblance to human speech patterns. "Let's try again," Marcus said, holding up a simple photograph of an apple. "Ap-pla. 2 syllables. A-P-play." Githara's response was the same as always, a gentle humming sound that seemed to vibrate through the air between them. Her breathing matched his rhythm perfectly, and that peculiar shimmer around her form pulsed in time with his heartbeat. It was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore the strangeness of these sessions. Marcus had tried every technique in his arsenal: phonetic charts, visual aids, even basic sign language. Other linguists on the station had suggested that perhaps Githara simply lacked the physical capability for human speech, but her vocal apparatus scans showed no obvious limitations. The medical team confirmed she possessed all the necessary structures for complex vocalization. "Maybe we're approaching this wrong," suggested Dr. Janet Morrison during their weekly progress review. "Some species communicate through chemical signals, electromagnetic fields, or even quantum entanglement. Perhaps spoken language isn't their primary communication mode." Marcus had considered this possibility, but Director Fontaine's orders were explicit. The refugees needed to master human language for integration purposes. The station couldn't function with dozens of different communication methods. There had to be a common linguistic framework. During their afternoon session, Marcus noticed something new. As he grew more frustrated with Kythera's apparent lack of progress, she began to lean forward slightly, her expression shifting to what could only be described as concern. When he rubbed his temples, fighting off a stress headache, she made a soft sound. Not an attempt at words, but something that felt oddly comforting. "I don't understand what you're trying to tell me," Marcus said, his professional composure cracking slightly. "We've been at this for weeks, and you haven't spoken a single recognizable word." Kythera's shimmer intensified, and for a moment, Marcus could have sworn he felt a wave of something. Not emotion exactly, but a sensation that reminded him of standing at the ocean's edge, feeling the rhythm of waves against his feet. It was both alien and strangely familiar. That night, Marcus stayed late in his office, reviewing footage of their sessions. There was definitely a pattern to Kythera's responses, but it wasn't linguistic in any conventional sense. Her shimmer, her breathing, even the subtle changes in her posture, seemed to correspond to his emotional state rather than his words. He made a note in his file. Subject appears to be responding to instructor's emotional condition rather than verbal instruction. Recommend consultation with Zenip Psychology Department. The breakthrough, the revelation, came during what Marcus had planned as their final session. Director Fontaine had expressed growing impatience with the lack of measurable progress, and Marcus was facing the very real possibility that his methods were simply inadequate for this species. The weight of potential failure pressed heavily on his shoulders as he entered Laboratory 7. Kythera was waiting in her usual position, but something was different. Her shimmer seemed more subdued, almost muted, and her typically perfect posture appeared slightly deflated. As Marcus arranged his materials with mechanical precision, he noticed she was watching him with an expression he'd never seen before, not just attention, but what appeared to be genuine sadness. "Today we're going to try a different approach," Marcus announced, though his heart wasn't in it. "Interactive storytelling. I'll tell you a simple story, and you can try to repeat key elements." He began with a basic narrative about a person finding a lost pet, but his voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. Halfway through the tale, he stopped abruptly. The futility of the exercise hit him like a physical blow. "This isn't working," he said, more to himself than to Kythera. "I've been teaching language for 15 years, and I can't get you to say a single word. Maybe Dr. Morrison was right. Maybe your species just communicates differently, and I'm trying to force something. That's impossible." As the words left his mouth, Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the same sensation he'd experienced 3 years ago, when his younger brother David had died in a transport accident. The grief he'd carefully compartmentalized came, rushing back, triggered by this professional failure that somehow felt much more personal. "I couldn't help him either," Marcus whispered, his professional facade finally cracking. "David always looked up to me, thought I had all the answers. But when he needed me most, when he was struggling with his addiction, I didn't know what to say. I kept trying to fix things with words, with logic, with advice, but words weren't what he needed." Kythera moved then, rising from her seat with fluid grace and approaching Marcus slowly. He expected her to attempt some clumsy English phrase, perhaps sorry or sad, words they'd practiced repeatedly. Instead, she did something completely unexpected. She placed her hand gently over his, her skin warm and strangely electric against his. Her breathing synchronized with his own, but this time Marcus felt it happening, a deliberate, conscious matching of rhythm. Her shimmer intensified, but now it felt different, like a gentle tide washing over him. And then Marcus understood. She hadn't been failing to learn language. She'd been speaking to him all along. Every synchronized breath, every shimmer, every moment of perfect attention had been her way of saying, "I see you. I understand. You are not alone." The realization hit him with startling clarity. Kithara had been learning about him, not from him. The understanding in the days following his breakthrough, Marcus approached their sessions with entirely new eyes. Instead of focusing on getting Kithara to produce human sounds, he began observing the intricate language she'd been using all along. Her communication was a symphony of synchronized breathing, empathic resonance, and what he was beginning to understand as emotional harmonics. "You've been listening to my feelings," Marcus said during their next meeting, no longer bothering with flashcards or pronunciation guides. "When I'm frustrated, your shimmer changes. When I'm sad, you breathe differently. You're not learning English, you're learning me." Kithara's response was immediate and unmistakable. Her form brightened, and Marcus felt a wave of something he could only describe as joy mixed with relief. It was as if she were saying, "Finally, you understand." Marcus began to experiment, consciously focusing on different emotions while speaking. When he thought about happy memories, Kithara's shimmer took on golden undertones. When he recalled moments of fear or anxiety, her breathing became deeper, more grounding, as if she were trying to calm him through osmosis. "This is incredible," Marcus recorded in his daily log. "The Zephyrians don't just communicate through emotion, they communicate emotion itself. They're essentially empathic translators, capable of understanding and responding to the deepest layers of meaning beneath words." He began bringing other researchers into their sessions, curious to see how Kithara would respond to different personalities. With Dr. Morrison's analytical mind, Kithara's shimmer became more crystalline, almost geometric in its patterns. With nervous intern Jake Phillips, her breathing became a steady, calming rhythm that visibly relaxed him. But it was during a session with Director Fontaine that Marcus truly grasped the implications of Kithara's abilities. The director had arrived. In one of his typically brusque moods, demanding progress reports and concrete results. Within minutes of his arrival, Kithara's entire demeanor had shifted. Her shimmer became more muted, her posture more formal, and her breathing matched the director's clipped, efficient rhythm. "Sir," Marcus said carefully, "I think she's not just understanding us, she's adapting to us. She's showing us how to communicate more effectively by reflecting our own patterns back to us." Fontaine, skeptical as always, crossed his arms. "That's not language, Dr. Webb. That's mimicry." But as he spoke, something remarkable happened. Kithara's shimmer suddenly pulsed with a deep, authoritative blue that seemed to mirror Fontaine's commanding presence. Then, gradually, it softened, becoming warmer, more inviting. Fontaine's rigid posture unconsciously relaxed, and his voice lost some of its edge. "Although," he continued, sounding almost surprised by his own tone, "I suppose effective communication has always been about more than just words." Marcus realized he was witnessing something unprecedented. Kithara wasn't just reading emotions, she was facilitating emotional understanding between different individuals. She was serving as a living bridge between different ways of thinking and feeling. "She's not learning our language," Marcus said with growing excitement. "She's teaching us hers. And her language might be something far more universal than anything we've ever imagined." The teacher 6 months after their first meeting, Marcus sat in Laboratory 7 for what would be their final official session. Word of Kithara's unique abilities had spread throughout the research facility and xenolinguistics departments across. Human space were requesting detailed reports on Zephyrian communication methods. But for Marcus, the most profound changes weren't academic, they were personal. Through his time with Kithara, he'd learned to recognize the emotional undercurrents in every conversation, the unspoken needs behind simple requests, the fear or hope that colored even the most mundane interactions. "You know," Marcus said, settling into his chair, "I thought I was supposed to teach you English. But you've taught me something much more important than real. Communication isn't about perfect pronunciation or flawless grammar. It's about being truly present with another being." Kithara's shimmer pulsed with what Marcus had learned to recognize as deep satisfaction mixed with affection. Over the months, he'd become fluent in her language of light and rhythm, able to read her responses as clearly as written text. "The other refugees are asking for you," Marcus continued. "Not just your people, but species from all over the galaxy. They say you help them understand each other, even when they don't share any common language at all." This was true. Kithara had become an unofficial ambassador among the displaced populations at Harmony Station. Somehow, her empathic abilities worked across species barriers, helping traumatized beings find connection and understanding in their darkest moments. Marcus pulled out a small recording device. "Director Fontaine wants me to create a formal report on your communication methods. But before I do that, I want to ask you something directly." He looked into her iridescent eyes, feeling that familiar sense of being truly seen. "Are you willing to teach others what you've taught me? Not just linguists, but doctors, counselors, diplomats, anyone who needs to understand what it really means to communicate?" Kithara's response was immediate and profound. Her shimmer expanded, becoming brighter and more complex than Marcus had ever seen. He felt waves of excitement, determination, and something that could only be described as love, not romantic love, but the deep, abiding love of someone who has found their true purpose. In that moment, Marcus understood that this had been her intention all along. She hadn't come to Harmony Station to learn human language. She'd come to teach humanity something far more valuable: the art of truly listening, of connecting not just with words, but with the full spectrum of conscious experience. "Thank you," Marcus said softly, knowing she would understand not just his words, but the gratitude, humility, and profound respect behind them. As he left Laboratory 7 for the last time, Marcus realized that Kithara had given him something precious, not just new knowledge, but a new way of being in the world. She had shown him that the deepest truths weren't spoken but felt, not taught but experienced, not learned but lived. And in doing so, she had proven that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology, their determination, or even their resilience. It was their capacity for connection, for empathy, for recognizing the profound dignity in every conscious being they encountered among the stars.